So, do you need some inspiration and hope on your eating disorder recovery journey? And would you like to know some of the key factors that really helped me on my journey and my healing? Now, in this episode, I'm going to share with you some of my secrets, healing from bulimia, how I came through it. I am Harriet Frew. This is the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I support people to overcome disordered eating and find peace with food. So let's dive in. So in my late teens and early 20s, I struggled with restriction, binge eating, and purging. That was such a dark time. Eating disorders were even less understood back then, and help for anyone who was not underweight was really lacking. Now, I felt pretty desperate, alone, although outwardly, you would have described me probably as healthy looking, with a positive outlook. Inwardly, I was far from this. Now, this isn't unusual really for someone with bulimia. The outward shiny glitter ball the world sees, contrasting with the inner, darker turbulence. Very real thing. Now, the process for me of recovery was anything but linear. It was messy, it was complicated, but it really taught me valuable life lessons and a deep compassion for anyone going through similar struggles. So, although I didn't realize it back then as well, it opened up my life path, my passion and my purpose, my training as a therapist. So today I'm going to share more about this personal healing, focusing on the different aspects of this. So some background context for those of you who are new here. So I developed bulimia when I was 17 years old. It was partly about body dissatisfaction and a desire to be thinner, but it was a lot more than this. It was more about an unconscious coping in response to emotional chaos at home, a relationship breakdown, lots of stresses in my life. So the pursuit of thinness was a desperate attempt to claw back glimmers of self-worth and cope with life. So following a brief honeymoon period, which we often experience, when I felt really in control, I lost weight, my body changed, I quickly fell into a slow and painful place, really where things unraveled and the disorder consumed me day and night, eroding any remaining self-esteem and becoming an ugly secret that I carried mostly in isolation. And it continued for several years in peaks and troughs. Now, when I was 23, on a beach in Western Australia, I decided that I was determined to overcome the eating disorder. I was very naive, idealistic, but I decided I'm going to train as a counsellor. I'm going to go back to the UK, and I was passionate about helping others in a way that I hadn't experienced myself. Now, I was absolutely a wounded healer. My symptoms had eased from the early days of bulimia, but I continued to struggle daily alongside my outwardly carefree outward presentation. So I returned to the UK, I began training as a therapist and going all in on my healing journey. And driven by my own experience, I became so passionate about supporting others on their path to food freedom. And I completed my counselling diploma in Cambridge, did a specialist eating disorders training on top. But fundamentally, so much of my experience was gleaned on the job in an adult NHS eating disorder service in Cambridge, working with a team of experienced practitioners, really where I learnt my trade. Now, over the past 2 decades, I've worked one-to-one with hundreds of clients, guiding them to overcome disordered eating, build self-compassion, rediscover joy in their lives, both in the National Health Service and in private practice. And in addition to the one-to-one therapy, I've recently developed a comprehensive resources, including a food freedom app, which brings together everything I've learned. So this is something you may want to go and check out if you're interested in healing and in an affordable way. The app will really help you to break free from disordered eating and negative body image, interrupting those symptoms and working on the deeper issues. It's like everything I use in the therapy room. It helps you establish regular balanced eating without anxiety or guilt, builds intuitive eating habits, self-compassion, confidence and self-esteem, all the things we really want. And it offers a personalized roadmap towards recovery. It really transforms your mindset with daily journaling, affirmations, expert guidance, tracks progress, overcoming challenges, and celebrates every step forward. And it also recommends podcast episodes that will inspire you. Okay, so let's dive into my journey and 3 areas that I have worked on in my recovery. Number 1, boosting motivation for long-term change. Now, when I had bulimia, I was desperate for someone to remove the binge and purge cycle from my life. I detested it. I detested it with a vengeance. Whereas restriction felt good, pure, worthy, the binge purge cycle felt disgusting and shameful. So I longed to return to the early days of my eating disorder where I was rigidly controlled with iron rod discipline around food. But was I truly ready for recovery and food freedom? probably not in the early days. In fact, I wanted my body to stay small, and I was adamant that regular healthy eating was not for me. And as much as I loathed aspects of the eating disorder, it was also something that was mine and mine alone. It was like, don't take it away from me. This is the one thing in my life that I have control over. It was a secretive world, though, to escape to, a dissociated bubble of protection away from real life. I had this life that no one knew about. So any stress or discomfort could be blanked over with a numbing eating frenzy or starvation. So the thought of losing this coping was terrifying and uncertain. Who would I be without this eating disorder? And what would I do with my overwhelming emotions? How would I survive out in the world? It all felt very daunting. Now, you may relate to aspects of this if you are listening or watching. If you're struggling with food, you probably feel in two minds about change. One part of you is desperate to move on and let go of the destructive relationship, but then another part of you is clinging on tightly because it's your safe thing. And it can feel perplexing and confusing as your feelings might vary across the day. That is very normal because food is fundamentally a coping strategy. Now, this can be conscious or not, but you can begin to explore your ambivalence around change and untangle what the eating disorder means to you. This is important. So maybe it's a way of dealing with difficult feelings. Maybe you're trying to control your weight. Maybe it's deeply familiar and offers safety and reassurance, all of these things. Maybe it's part of your identity and you don't know who you are without it. But you can gain a deeper understanding about your ambivalence, really important part of the work. This creates clarity and breathing space to begin to contemplate change and to deal with those deeper issues. Now, in my own recovery, I had to acknowledge the coping aspects of the eating disorder and to radically face the reality of what I was doing to my body and mind. Okay, not easy work, and it's painful, difficult work. I didn't want to gain weight. I didn't want to face those messy emotions. I liked this kind of control. And at the time, I was torn between wanting to pursue my own path and pursue freedom, while simultaneously racked by immense guilt for not pursuing the path that my dad wanted for me. So I didn't want to engage with those messy feelings. It was painful. It didn't feel like there was a peaceful way out or a solution through it all. So bulimia really helped me stuff it all down and escape from that pain. But ultimately, I didn't want to live my life another day in this truly soul-destroying cycle. The negative aspects were like a stick to motivate me. I didn't want to feel this despairing anymore. And I decided that I wanted to train as a therapist and to support others. And this was a turning point, digging deep into my values and my purpose. I wanted to be an authentic version of myself and to dispense with my false persona and this incredible isolation. So this created a lighthouse of hope on the distant horizon. I had no idea how I was going to do it, but it encouraged me to put one foot in front of the other and really to begin crawling towards something different. It wasn't glamorous. So it's important to have a carrot, something to pull you forward as a positive. And it's also important probably to have a stick, something to push you on and to move you away from something that's negative. Okay, second thing that really helped me, looking at the roots of the problem. Now, my upbringing was in some ways reasonably relaxed food-wise. I didn't experience the stereotypical dieting parents and weight comments that many of my clients have tasted firsthand. But my parents were raised post-war in an environment where emotional support and mental health were practically zero. Both my parents, eldest children, and really experienced that parentified child dynamic, caretaking their own mother and father, carrying a huge weight of responsibility from a young age. Responsibility holics through and through. And both were so adept at people pleasing, adopting the good boy, good girl dynamics with little self-expression or understanding of their own needs, wants, or desires. And it was all about seeking approval and validation from family, community, and friends. It's about doing the right thing by others and keeping the peace. Now, this was a normal framework for many families of this generation, but naturally, this resulted in a lot of anger unconsciously beneath the surface. For both my parents, my dad would rant and overtly express anger with aggression and over control. And my mum would covertly leak her suppressed anger through constant moaning, blaming, and understandable resentment. Now, I guess they had no other frame of reference. They married really early in their 20s with no space or freedom for that individuation or self expression. So they were unconsciously living out these dynamics, and quickly 4 children came into the mix. I mean, no wonder they struggled. But I think for me, being born into this family, into this system, it's no surprise that I willingly took the baton and continued with the generational trauma response. So the eating disorder was a vehicle to push back against those obligations and expectations pressed down on me, whilst also attempting to maintain the good girl status and to please my parents and to please the world. So restriction offered control, a semblance of coping and order, and binging and purging was a protest, a powerful signal, rebellion against it all, because it felt unsafe to express my true self through words or boundaries or assertive communication. So my anger and frustration was channeled inward through those behavioral cycles in an attempt to find relief. Now, pre-eating disorder, I was juggling the life pressures and just about keeping afloat in the choppy waters. But when I was 17, following the loss of my first love relationship, coupled with exam pressures, arguments at home, that was a tipping point for me that really pushed me underwater, and I developed bulimia. Now, I didn't have the words or self-awareness or psychological insight to articulate what was going on, but the disorder was an exemplary expression of the inner conflict I carried within. So think about your own journey. There is not a simple cause and effect to developing an eating disorder. And it's said that genetics loads the gun and environment pulls the trigger. It's a complex mix. Many contributing factors will have combined to influence your relationship with food and with yourself. But you can gently explore the different strands. So you develop psychological understanding, awareness, and you'll be piecing together parts of the jigsaw puzzle to gain some clarity. Now, understanding won't automatically bring about change. However, I believe that's an important baseline for healing. Now, my own healing has come through many different roads and passages, but relationships have been fundamentally key. Now, this has meant finding safe places to share my real self, not the people-pleasing adapted version of myself. And that has been so important, because the people-pleasing was all about survival. So close friendships, personal therapy, talking with my sisters, all of these things have been invaluable, but also the ongoing process of self-inquiry and building self-awareness, journaling, therapy, educating myself through helpful content and books. So I have now taken full responsibility for my healing path. And yes, my path has impacted me, but it is now my choice to move forward and to work and break the chains of transgenerational trauma and to create a different life for myself and my own family. But the path is ongoing. And number 3, establishing regular eating and restoring weight. Now, I look back at my 17-year-old diary entries. I was living on cottage cheese, fruit, and measly, thinly sliced low-carb bread. Pretty miserable. On a good day, I channeled the self-discipline with, self-satisfaction control, but I was barely eating. But I experienced glimmers of worth and happiness as I followed my rules. But never mind that half the day was spent in hunger, food preoccupation, feeling tired, weak, all the rest of it. And never mind that half the day was also just spent feeling exhausted, weary, feeling freezing cold on a warm day in August. But then increasingly as the day progressed, the hunger would become extreme and unbearable. I would surrender to the longing for food and would binge eat. And I felt addicted to food, and I would have humongous binge eating episodes, devouring every food off the banned list, all the things I would normally avoid, spending lots of money in the supermarket on chocolate, donuts, crisps, biscuits, and more. And it was a secretive, wildly chaotic experience that I would hide from others. And I would enjoy those first euphoric mouthfuls, but it quickly became an arduous ritual to get through. I didn't enjoy it anymore. And then, terrified of potential weight gain, I would purge it all afterwards. And yes, this brought temporary relief, but I cannot describe the catastrophic damage it does to self-worth and self-respect. I felt unworthy and a complete psychological mess. I didn't feel good. And this infiltrated out into every area of my life. Friendships, love, relationships, work. Everything was a reflection of my inner turbulence. And I didn't understand about regular eating, balancing blood sugar levels back then, and I chaotically binged my way back to a healthy weight, gaining kilos in a 2-month period. Now, it was an extremely difficult phase which felt like a failure after the preceding discipline and restraint. But in time, I learned through trial and error that regular eating brought stability and safety in the body. With blood sugar levels not fluctuating like a yo-yo, the extreme hunger reduced and my emotional landscape was less turbulent. I had wisdom now to draw upon from a calmer body state. And as my body stabilized at its healthy weight, I wasn't constantly fighting it anymore. Now, this took some radical acceptance and an intense grief for letting go of thinness and everything this represented. But ultimately, for me, thinness had become so equated with misery, unbearable hunger, and a feeling of disconnection from real living. So as much as I struggled with weight gain, the peace of escaping the anxious starvation, being able to laugh again, being connected with people, being more engaged in life, it brought so many benefits and immeasurable contentment. So let's talk more practically about regular eating. So this means building up to eating 6 times a day with 3 meals and 3 snacks, but start where you are. Never going more than approximately 3 hours without eating, then your body knows that food is coming and can begin to experience safety. Now, you're far less likely to experience extreme hunger when you're doing your regular eating. You probably will still experience it, but not so intensely. Regular eating offers a scaffolding of self-care, stabilizes blood sugar, calms the body physiology. You're avoiding the anxious irritability that is inevitable when you override hunger signals. Now, regular eating created a stable foundation for my psychological recovery work, and it allowed me to move beyond the anxious, starved, preoccupied state to a place where I had bandwidth to focus, reflect, and concentrate. So it is the boring, unsexy work of recovery that is essential stepping stone. Okay, so what to take away from this episode? I want you to know that it's possible to change and find your personal food freedom. Now, I know this is true for my own recovery and from supporting hundreds of others in therapy. It is possible for you too, and there will be many inevitable bumps on the journey, but it's worth taking the courageous step to seek support, and it is never too late. It's never too late. Letting go of disordered eating patterns is not only about improving your relationship with food and body, but it can be about finding yourself, okay, and engaging more fully with life. And that is so much more meaningful. Do get in touch if you're interested in one-to-one therapy. harriet.frew@gmail.com. Do check out my Food Freedom app if you would like some more support, if you want to kind of work with me in an affordable way. Do you relate to any aspects of my journey? How is your recovery going today? Do let me know in the comments. I would love to hear from you. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening and watching the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. Do subscribe on YouTube for more videos. Do follow, rate, and review if you're listening on Apple or Spotify or one of the other platforms. I look forward to sharing another episode with you very soon. Bye for now.